and then we can certainly go for a lot longer and take it in any direction. But I'm gonna start it off with about a 15-20 minute kind of demo, if you will. Um, like I said, there's way too much to show. We're going to talk about resources in a little bit. I'll encourage you to, if you've never seen some of these resources, to go check them out. You know, this is an interactive dock, which is quite handy, nice to have on your iPad next to you. And if you don't know where that is, we can point you to with how to find that. But while we're rolling through this, Gil will probably interject a little bit. But if you do have kind of questions that are specific, you can throw them into the chat, and that's another way that we can kind of interact kind of while I'm doing the first chunk. Okay. So that's where I think we're going to start. So I have a session up. You should be able to see. Let me just start by kind of describing what I have here with regard to this console configuration. We're going to go over to the Surface page so you can see what I've got. What I've got is basically an S4 16 fader, so 2 channel strip modules, as you can see, and then an options bucket, which is composed of a joystick module, knob, attention knobs, right? And then at the top there, I've got a display module, which is allocated as a master meter module, which there is also kind of a hidden PEC direct module over here. We could also do PEC meters if we wanted to go into that workflow. So you should be able to see everything, and if we need to dive into any one particular view, we can do that. So I wanted to start and kind of get into some basic ideas with regard to managing surround elements on the desk. And I'm not going to assume you have a joystick. I'm going to show you several different ways to manage kind of the same information, I think, which is important to understand. Okay, and along the way, we're going to take advantage of food groups, right? In this case, it's music. It doesn't matter. For this example, it makes no difference. Your food groups might be dialogue music effects. These might be guitars, keyboards, horns. It makes no difference. But the point being, we're going to basically be navigating by leveraging VCAs or routing folders, which are both excellent ways to access elements on the desk quickly, right? Okay, so let's dig in and take a look at some basic stuff first. So the first thing is I've got some members, some horns here. You can see some of these sax tracks, which are sitting in this spilled group, this spilled zone, if you will. And you should be able to see a little bit on the display modules as well that you're seeing pan parameters and you're seeing the pan plot up there. I want to start with a couple preferences. I know preferences are really boring, but it's really quite important to be able to wrangle kind of what you see and how you see it, right? So I'm using the shift display 1 or 2 to change my display view because I really only want to, in this case, see panning. If you want to see EQ and pan, for example, you can go to a dual function view. And the dual function view is always going to show, even if I switch one of these sax tracks, let's just go and change this into EQ, you're always going to see pan on the bottom, right? So if you want to see a dual function, that's fine, absolutely fine. I'm going to close the pan window, the plugin window right here. But in this case, I'm actually just going to go Shift Display 2, and I'm basically going to go look at pan. Okay, so I'm just showing one particular function. So we're going to start with some preferences, which are important, and it's going to define kind of how we get around. So to do that, go to the Settings button, and a couple things here. So near the bottom of the main user settings, there's something that says Open Windows on Knob Touch. I'm going to leverage that, and basically what that does is it says, hey, respond if I touch something and open up a window in Pro Tools. Now, I'm also going to specifically tell it that I care about plugins and I care about pan, but you know what? Don't show me sends, and that's just my particular preference. And so those couple preferences, as we kind of kick it off here, is going to give me the ability to, and let me just close the pan window on the soft keys here, top level. I can close any of the windows. If I go and grab an EQ, there's my filters on a channel strip, as you can see. I'm going to close that. And if I go and grab a pan, we'll just go grab the joysticks, it's going to open up that particular thing that is attentioned. In this case, it's the sax OD, which has been brought over there, okay? So that's the basics, right? It says, hey, if I'm a plugin, I will let you bring up the window. If I'm a pan, I will let you bring up the window, okay? So that's kind of where we're going to start. One more thing, actually, the way I've set this up, and we talked about, the last session, we talked about just a ton of on-attention behaviors. So I don't want to get in too deep on that just yet, but If you go to the home page, so we're on the home page right now, lower home button, and you hit the lower gear, you can define the thing that is shown with the function and knob page on attention change. I'm just going to change it just so you can see the change. I'm going to attention a different track. Let's attention the sax track. Okay, and so what did it do? It brought up EQ. It brought up EQ because I set it to EQ. So I'm actually gonna, I usually set this personally to a default of pan. For this type of demo, for this type of workflow, I'm gonna specify that on attention on the master mod, essentially it's going to, when I attention a track, it's gonna show pan. And that pan right now is in a 2D view, and we'll explain that. And that depends on the type of surround track, okay? So the sax OD is attentioned. It's also on the attention fader, and then it also has been brought over the joystick module. Okay, so let's take a look at some different types of control now that we've done a little bit of preference wrangling to be able to see, to be able to see, to be able to see. If I want, a plugin, things like that, let's do a little bit of control and show you the various ways that you can control panning information on the desk. Okay, and I'm going to show you 4 or 5 different ways to start. So the first thing that I think is really important is we've attentioned the sax OD track, and you can see it here, you can see it here, and you can obviously, I have a joystick, so you can see it here. It's a 5-1. Right, I can see that has a 5-1 output path. The first thing that's really important is we default now to 2-knob panning. And 2-knob panning basically says that you have a front and a front-rear interface. And if you take a look at the interface in Pro Tools, you can see that the front and rear are linked, right? That is basically, you don't have to manage, by default, you don't have to manage more complexity. You can do a lot, which is with 2 knobs, which I think is quite cool. So, but to understand kind of how you manage that, there is a linked and in switch right here. Okay, and that's also it's also right here, right, the in switch. And if I unlink the in switch, then you are independently controlling the front. I'm going to toggle with cell and the rear, and there is your front rear. Okay, so I've unlinked the front and rear, as you can see that little indicator in the UI in Pro Tools, so that I can now, if I wanted to do a front left to rear surround pan, I could do that with 1 knob. Okay, I'm going to press cell on the bottom encoder, and that goes back to controlling the front. If I press the in, it'll relink everybody back up. And now I'm back into a 2-knob pan interface, which I think is very efficient. And obviously you're going to see on the display module that particular interface as well, okay? So let's expand kind of into more views kind of relatively quickly. So I'm looking at an inline view on the desk with regard to the pan. Obviously I can go over here and I can grab and I can place that. I can go over to the joystick, I can grab, I can place that. Let's jump into an expanded view here, and we'll talk about expand faders a little bit, and we'll maybe rebuild them quickly. But I am on this 5-1 track, and I'm going to basically make sure it's focused. And the focus buttons are right here, and then I'm going to hit expand. Okay, and now it stole all of the knob real estate to show just pan parameters, as you can see. And down here, it's brought back my map that I created. Now, the first thing I want to mention and kind of bring your attention to is whenever you bring a parameter from the expand zone down, it not only brings the parameter, it brings the associated switches as well. What does that mean? Well, basically it means anything that is an in switch up here is a mute switch here. Anything that is a select here or a cell here is a select here. As such, if I were to look at the same kind of interface and I press mute, that mute is actually the in. It is exactly what we just previously did. There's the front, and if I hit cell, there's the rear, and we're doing exactly the same workflow we just did. We're just using the switches that have been mapped down. Okay, so front, rear, right, as you can see. And then if I turn the mute back on, I've linked, I'm back into 2-knob view. Okay, 2-knob control, okay? Now this map is arbitrary. What do I mean by that? Well, it's whatever you want it to be. So if I jump back out and show you how to make it really fast, basically hold down the attention and hit expand. It says, hey, you've got something there already. I'm going to flash blue to show you that there's something there. Great. So I'm going to hit clear. Clear basically says, you know what? I want to start over. I don't like what I just did here. And what I can do is I can just say, hey, let's do front rear. I don't know, maybe I want LFE here. want center percentage here, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to put your divergences and however makes sense to you, you can absolutely do that. When you're done, you hit expand. Okay. So now what happens is, and I should probably show you a quick preference because that is important to understand the way that it's invoked. If we go back to settings, and there's a whole chunk of stuff in here that is important right here, which says auto expand functions. The little tick box, and I'm not going to get into these just yet. The auto expand faders tick box basically says, hey, if I jump into an expanded knob view and you happen to also see that I've created a map on the faders, I want to see that. That's basically what it says, right? So I'm on this XOD, I am going to hit expand, and we can jump into that particular view that I created, okay? Now, let's talk about some different flavors, different kind of surround formats. And I kind of created this intentionally that there's a 5.1 here and I've got a 7.1. I want to show you a quad and LCR, etc. So a couple things I think that are also really useful. Even while you're in this view, let's just kind of mangle this a little bit by changing divergences, changing center percentage, blah, blah, blah. I can use the Option key and I can do nulling. Right, that's pretty handy if you want to quickly get back to, you're going to get back to a center perspective, right, very quickly, or you want to get back to center, a discrete center channel speaker, piece of cake, right? That's pretty simple. Okay, so I'm going to now jump out. We're going to hit expand. We're going to jump out. I'm going to go to the next track. And we're going to hit attention and focus. What did I do? Well, I want to show you, I want to kind of contrast a little bit more information as we kind of go into, that was a 5.1, now this is a 7.1. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hit expand. And we're going to jump in and actually look at this a little bit. Okay, so same kind of view, if you will. There's your front rear. If we talked about the center, the switched functions, right? So I want to talk about that briefly here. There's your center percentage, right, which is 0. So I've got a total phantom center versus a discrete center, right? And if you're in a 7.1, you can flip over using the select, and now your side percentage is here. Right? There's your sides. Right? If you want to attenuate the sides, get rid of the sides completely, you can do that. There's your side percentage. There's your center percentage. Okay, so switched functions are important as you get into this. Another great thing to instead of having to null a whole bunch of stuff, you can, let's just put some divergences on real quick here. Very handy to basically do what we call a clear, right? It was the default all parameters on one function. And I'm going to show you that. So basically, while I'm in here, it doesn't matter if I'm just doing control, from the knobs or from faders or whatever, I can hit clear, choose the function type of pan, and it's going to take me back, right? This is really useful to get back to a known kind of start set, right? And start over from there. Okay, so that's what that does. Okay, so let's jump back out. I'm going to go one more here.
Jeff, real quick.
Yeah.
That also works with other types of data, right? So if you were in an insert, you had a plug-in, you can hit that clear button and it'll basically reset everything back to its default state, correct?
Default settings, yep, exactly. It can be really handy if you want to,
Yeah, I just want to make sure
would that be your user default then, if you've set the default for the plugin is a user default?
It does use user default, like for an EQ. Yeah, because I've got those set up on my
EQs. It'd either be factory default, or if you've set the user default up for a plugin, it would use that as the default.
Exactly. If you've chosen the tick box that says user, it will use user. Yeah, exactly. So, okay, let's go to the next track here real quick, and then we'll kind of go into another topic. So this is, what did we do here? I think I did a quad, just to have some diversity. There's a quad, right? And this brings me into the next kind of, let's introduce another preference, because I think the preferences are important to understand. You don't have to get totally into the weeds and how you use them, but you do need to understand how they work. So I'm going to show you some preferences. And the next one to really understand, which is important, is jump back out, go to settings, and the preference we're going to look at two of them. And the first one is specific to the joystick, okay? And it's just the way that you attention and get things to the joystick. So I'm just going to go and grab this and set it to off. What this says is assign right joystick timeout. And basically, if it's off, anything I attention is only going to fly into, and that's a mono element, it's only going to fly into the left side because it says, hey, I don't know that the right side exists, right? the second that I increase the threshold of time, let's just go 2 seconds. It says you have 2 seconds after you press the first thing to get into the second side, right? If that makes sense. I'm going to always default to go to the left side, but then after I see that that's populated, you got 2 seconds or X seconds to get into the right side, okay? So that's what that preference does. And so if I wanted to get 2 mono things into there, I would do press, within 2 seconds, press, and then you can see I have those elements that are just have been loaded into the panner, okay? So that's the first one I wanted to show you. The second one is, so it's remember joystick knobs by track, okay? So that's the one I wanted to get into. And it can be used 2 different ways. I'll show you one way, and then depending on a different workflow, it would be a different thing. So let's explain it. Remember joystick knobs by track, okay? So for example, let's go back to our 5-1. I'm gonna hit attention, we're gonna hit focus. That's been brought, over here, as you can see. Let's just say this is a 5-1. I want LFE to be right here, right? So I'm going to go through the encoders, and I'm going to choose LFE. There's your LFE, okay? I'm going to go to the 7-1. So I'm going to focus the 7-1. And I want that to be, let's say, LFE also. Okay, there's your LFE. Let's go to sax, which actually is feeding a 712 bed, and it's obviously also a stereo object. So I'm going to attention sax. And let's say I want elevation to be there. I want Z to be there. Okay, so I'm going to go basically find L height. Okay, and you can see, there's your Z. I'm looking at a 2D view in Pro Tools. I'm looking at a 3D view on the console, which we'll get into a little more detail. So what did I just do? Well, basically, if I go back to that 5-1, it says, hey, you wanted LFE, right? If I go to the 7-1, hey, I remember you wanted LFE. If I go back to the 7-1-2, I know you want height, right? Okay, so that's the A case. The B case is if you are in an all Atmos session and you're just managing, basically mono stereo objects, you probably want that to be consistent. And if you do that, then you would turn it off. You'd basically say, hey, I just want to leave it on height, and every time I go, I want height control. Okay, so that's one. It's an alternative way to kind of look at that. Okay, let's look at a couple things with regard to Atmos and parameters and some control on the joystick as well. So there's a lot going on here. This is a stereo track. It has the ability to either be in bed mode or object mode. It is currently, as you can see, it's green, so it is a bed. Let's do the object switching first, then we'll come back to some of the parameters here. So there's different strategies to getting to those parameters. One way is just on that individual track, I can just press the bus button, okay? And just from the bus button, I have the ability, and then after you press the bus button, I can re-press, attention if I need to see the panner over here. But basically, I can flip between object and bus, and you will see, obviously, depending on the view, you're looking at the size parameter being orange and giving you an indication. But obviously, you'll also see in Pro Tools UI significantly that it is in an object mode. Okay, so that's one possibility. If you want to stay in pan here, you can also, I'm just going to go back to pan for a second. What you can also do is you could do a kind of an instantaneous parameter view. What I mean by that is basically to grab object bus switching and basically dock it, right? So I just did a touch. I still have access to my EQ if I was doing some EQ or if I was doing some panning and I wanted to get to that, great. But I've temporarily thrown object bus switching up here, and that's what I just did, okay? As always, when you re-attention the track or tracks, it's gonna go back to the default state, which is what we did last month, which is, I set up what I always wanna see here, and here, and that's EQ and dyne, okay? So that's a way to basically get to object bus switching. One other important thing with regard to that is, as always, Shift 1 is a great thing to know. Shift 1 is all automation, right? And if we let's just bring up the Pro Tools thing also so you can see it. The global for object bus is right here, right? So that's gonna defeat the ability to do writing of object bus switching, right? So that is important to know. It is on the globals page, as is every other possible automatable parameter, okay? So that's there. I'm gonna get rid of that. Okay, so a little bit more about wrangling Atmos stuff. Let's just go to a different set of tracks. I'm gonna menu out, go back to my VCAs, and we're gonna jump into guitars, okay? Doesn't matter. I've got a mono guitar here. You can see it right here. Let's also bring up the expand fader view just so you can see. We can see a lot of different things at once. I think this is not necessarily about I'm gonna use it this exact way, but I want to show you control, 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 and you get to choose what you want to use and how you want to use it. Okay. So on attention, electric guitar 32 has been brought. It is the attention track, and you can see obviously there's my X, Y. Okay. If it is a mono thing, actually, even if it's a stereo thing, it doesn't have to be mono. You can do Shift Y, which is very handy, and that gives you X, Y, Z. Okay. So if you go up on the right stick, you're adding elevation, as you can see right there. So X, Y, Z, and then we very handily give you size percentage here. Right. So you want to bleed, you want to spill that thing into multiple speakers. You're going to use size, which is excellent. A very handy thing in the Atmos world to be able to do. So I'm going to pull size down and XYZ. To get back to the previous view, if it is a stereo thing, you do the same thing. So let me just jump out so you can see that really quickly. We'll go to, I don't know, bridge guitar, right? So that is a stereo. I believe it's a stereo. Yeah, it's a stereo thing. You can see, obviously, I have both sides, control right there. And I would do Shift Y, same exact drill. There's your Z. They're linked, right? So my Z, my elevation is going to apply to both, as you can see. And I can Shift Y to go back to where I was, okay? So while we're in here, let's just go back to expanded view so we can see a little bit more here and here. Let's take a look at some of the extra goodness with regard to some of the parameters. So let's go, actually, we'll go back to the mono track for just a second, okay? So I'm going to go and let's do a little bit of remapping here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we're going to go and hold down attention and hit expand. We're in pan mode on this track, and I'm going to hit attention and I'm going to hit expand. And we're basically going to clear an existing map that exists. So let's do this one more time. Sorry. I'm going to hit clear. Okay. We're gonna build something different here. Okay, so what I want to have control over are the elevation modes. So I'm going to put elevation modes here. I want basically XYZ size, right? So here is X, Y, Z size is here. Okay, and then obviously I can add zone masks, the center percentage, which we talked about, which would also be side percentage. Okay, so I wanted to show a couple other things with regard to getting to some of those different parameters. So obviously we already talked about this. There's your X, Y, Z, right? There's your size percentage. Talked about that. If you do Shift Y, you're going to have access to Z and size. Talked about that. If you Shift Y again, you're back to that particular view to access both sides of a stereo element if you had it. If you do Shift X, it's going to step through the elevation modes, right? The goodness of, wedge and sphere and ceiling, and then back to freeform. Okay, so that's what that's doing. It's cycling through the auto Z modes. And if you're not familiar with the auto Z modes, basically, let's go to sphere. It allows you to essentially control the X and the Y, and in the Atmos, the Dolby Atmos renderer is basically taking care of Z for you, right? There's the concept of a vaulted ceiling with wedge, or in this case, a dome ceiling with sphere, right? Those kind of ideas. So I can do everything with one joystick because it's taking care of Z for me, right? That's what that's doing.
Hey, Jeff, before you go on real quick, Jonathan asked if you'd show how to rotate the 3D panner on the... Yeah. A lot of people it's a little bit of a trick. So if you could do that real quick.
That's a great one. Thank you. Yeah, there's too many things, right? So, yes. So you can, so in Pro Tools, on the Master Touch module, on the joystick module, you can see multiple different types of views. On the home page, right? So again, we are on the home page now, which is looks at the attention track, which is this mono track, right? You can either look at 2D or 3D view, right? There's 2D. And if in 2D view, there's things that are handy, right? If I want to jump to a specific speaker, it can snap to specific speakers, right? That's handy. If I bring up a size percentage, you're going to see it's going to kind of give you that grid view. And then the puck is the Z, right? So the puck size is the Z, if that makes sense, okay? If I switch into 3D mode, it gives you the geometric view. And basically what you do is use a 3-finger gesture while holding the shift key, right? This is like, you know.
And that's the shift key on the master module, right?
Yeah, exactly. Now there's another way to do that too. You can actually come over to the joystick module if you have it, and you can hold down setup, and you can actually move the Z around from here too if you want to be super clever. But it's kind of small. I don't think I would personally recommend using the 3D view on the joystick. You can. I don't think it's that great personally. So but for doing it here, shift here, move the room, figure out where you want it. 3-finger gesture is the way to go. If you want to switch back to 2D view, there you go. One thing that's important that is useful, very good information to understand is that size view and the divergence views, they're not necessarily always there. And what I mean by that is, let's go back to, let's go back to our horns for a second. Just go back to the horns, and let's go back to, I don't know, whatever. Let's go to one of these tracks. It's a 5-1, I think. And let's just do a little bit of divergence. Okay, we'll just jump in quickly, change the divergence. This both button, what does this do? Well, it basically is a way to filter for the left channel or the right channel if you want to see divergence views, right? If that's on either none or right in this case, you're not going to see divergence, you're not going to see size percentage, you're not going to see any of that. So when we go back to, let's just go back to our guitars and attention our electric guitar and push into some size, right? We do have size, right? We are bleeding into multiple speakers, but you can't see it because we've chosen to filter it to not show it. And because you can see a stereo thing on the panner, that's why it gives you the granularity of left and right. Okay, if that makes sense. So X, Y, Z, size, right? We're choosing to show that, okay? Thanks, that's a really good one. So height modes, right? I can obviously change height modes here. I can change height modes there, wherever. There's another really cool thing in here that you may or may not know, which is, let's just do a quick little pan thing. And I want to show you something really quick, which is kind of fun. And let's just, 2 things. No, there's always 2 things, right? It's more than 2 things. But okay, so I'm going to go to memory locations, and I'm just going to switch over. I'm going to look at my guitars for a second, and we're going to go back to 1 here. Now, one thing that's useful, I do this all the time, and you can do it too. If you command control touch a track, you can basically, have it justify the track, right? So I was looking at sax things. I want to actually show you specifically this track at the same time. So command control is always, I want to see volume, or if you press the select, I want to see the waveform, but it's also a quick way to jump to and justify that thing in the edit and the mix window. That's really useful, right? Okay, so what did I want to do here? Well, I want to show you a little bit of automation, okay? I think there's some stuff there already, which is fine, it doesn't matter. Which there is. There's some things moving around, which is great. Okay, great. So we're gonna go. Let's just throw this into a latch mode for a second here. And latch is useful if you wanted to start at a certain value. What does that mean? Well, if I knew that I wanted this thing to start, left, high, and let's just jump into expand here so I can see everything here as well. So I want to start left, high. I said high, right? And maybe I don't want any center percentage at all, blah, blah, blah. One thing that's cool here, if you're doing a prime, that can be kind of fun, is, again, you could leverage clear. You could do clear pan. It basically primes everything to the default state. And then you could come back and say, hey, I want center, but I want high and a little bit of size, okay? Now when I hit play, I'm burning automation with this exact value, right? So boom, it's going to start at that value, obviously, right? Now I'm going to make some moves and move around, whatever. And I can, match out. I can use auto match to get out, okay? Again, if I choose to flip into an auto elevation mode, let's just go to wedge. Wedge is fun. And it's being primed, so it's going to start in wedge, right? And a wedge is a vaulted ceiling, right? As you can see, you see the Z happening automatically. So I'm going to hit play. And I'm only XYing, right? I'm only XYing, but it's taking care of Z, right? Okay, that's the idea. So I want to interrogate Z. How do I interrogate Z? Command Control, hit Z, and you're going to see the height automation information there, right? That's the Z. That's written to the track, okay? Regardless of what height mode I'm in. Now, there's something in here that's pretty slick, which is basically a way, and so I'll show you in the Pro Tools Panner first. It's right here. Auto height overrides height automation. And what this does is, if it's turned on, and it's turned on right here, okay, that select on the height mode control is going to enable that function. What does that function do? Well, it basically says that I have the ability to ignore the hard-written Z, and I can audition some other stuff by just changing, by changing the modes, right? So, for example, let's just look at. Let me just go back into read for a second here, and let's hit play, and let's go into sphere mode, right? Or actually, let's go into ceiling, because ceiling is dramatic. Ceiling says basically you're always at Z unless you're at the screen, right? So, and of course I automated my height mode. So let's just do something real quick here. This is very simple. I'm just gonna we're gonna go back into Latch. Okay, so I'm just gonna do basically a static setting. What do I mean by that? Well, basically I'm in Latch. I could do clear pan. Everything is primed. I can say I want freeform for the whole time range. I want, whatever setting for the whole time range. And I basically hit write to all. Okay, so I just printed that hard setting to the whole timeline, to the whole selection, right? To the selection, okay? Okay, now back to what I was just saying before I got so rudely interrupted by myself. Basically, based on what's happening in the XY, okay, so the XY is, looks like this. I'm gonna have some X and Y automation. The height mode has been hard printed for the whole time for freeform, which is fine, right? There's my XY automation. You should see that playback. Okay, and now let's just jump out of right for a second. I'm gonna go into ceiling. Hit play. And ceiling. Okay, so basically it's saying that it is going to apply the Z of the ceiling or of the wedge or of the free or of the whatever auto Z mode I choose to that thing, and then I can conform that, right? So let me just do this real quick. It's a little bit interesting. So let's just go into wedge. Okay. So the idea with this is basically you could take an existing XY from a 5.1 or a 7.1, and you could audition different automatic Z, have it take care of the elevation for you automatically. Is right with essentially what that's doing. Okay. Okay. I should probably pause for a second and see if there are any questions or any specific directions we want to go. Because I can go for a long time. Any questions or things that I don't know if Gil's been answering the chat at all.
There's only been the one question, but
okay, cool.
Yeah, definitely want to see if at this point, that's definitely a lot of information to absorb. Anybody have any questions on what he's talked about, or just kind of to get clarity on a couple things?
Thought I have actually to add to what Jeff said about custom fader maps. One thing I love a lot is the physics of sound. If something moves closer, it gets bigger for me, right? So one thing I find myself using a lot on the fader map is actually the size and the front rear setting. So I can actually have two faders, and when I move one hand, it actually not only moves closer and grows at the same time. Right. So that I find very useful when using fader maps. And the second thing I wanted to add is the whole option resetting faders. I also love the fact that it's very simple, but option is wipe the knobs to reset settings.
It's a good one.
EQ, I don't like it, just wipe it, literally.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. So let's take a look at, I wanted to show a little bit of automation, but specific to preview and snapshots, which I think can be very useful. Whether it's one track or a whole bunch of tracks, like in this case, all of the guitars, all the horns, can be very useful. But I want to show you kind of some ideas of how you can do that. So let's go to, it doesn't really matter which track we use in this case, but the guitar's fine. I'm going to jump back into the guitar, and I'm actually going to go into preview mode. And preview is, as always, it's an isolated buffer, right? So that if I was in preview, let's just go do the clear pan again, right? It basically primed all of the parameters that are part of that that set, right? So kind of regardless of what I'm doing, if I hit play, all that stuff is isolated. If I hit suspend preview, it's going to play back whatever I had previously on disk, okay? So there's a cool thing with regard to preview that allows you to not only try things, but also create a capture or a snapshot of that idea, that placement of one or multiple tracks in space, and then preserve that as a snapshot. I think is a really useful function. So what I want to show is, I'm going to go back to clear. Okay, let's just say for the first setting, we want to print this state. Okay, and how do we do that? Well, basically from the shift 1, so if we go back to shift 1, which is all automation functions, I want to basically access snapshots, which is snap 1. So snapshots are there, and then obviously your automation 1, 2 is down here. I'm still in preview, right? So what I'm going to do is capture kind of a defaulted state. Let's just say we're actually a little bit further back, okay? And I'm going to hit capture, okay? So I captured that. Now it's in a destructive buffer, meaning if I turn preview off, it's gone. So I actually want to save it. So to do that, what I can do is basically hit save snapshot and then push a location, okay? And then I'm going to hit rename that location. And, depending on the element, you're going to want to give it a better name than I just gave it. But the point of it is that you've preserved that thing. Okay, so let's do the same thing again. I'm going to go back to clear, kind of zero this out. Let's say we're going to do something. We're going to go way back here, up high, center percentage is down to 0, et cetera. Size grows a little bit, whatever, right? So that's a totally different treatment, right? Same idea. We can hit capture. And we can basically now say save snapshot and dump that into the second location. Now, as always, I would rename that, give it an appropriate name depending on, this is whatever the treatment is for whatever the element is that you're working on, right? Okay. So let's just do one more real quick here. Again, if I take preview off, the buffer is flushed. I'm back to whatever we had previously written. As you can see, there's a lot of, Z happening right there. Turn preview back on. I like to just hit clear and kind of, zero that, if you will. And then, whatever you're gonna do next. Okay. So capture, save snapshot, and then dump it into a location. There's your location. Rename the location. Rename snap, and give it a name. Okay. So that's super. Pretty straightforward, right? So basically now, while I'm in preview, check this out. I can just literally hit 1 and I can punch the capture, right? There's that perspective. I can hit 2, punch the capture, hit 3, punch the capture. but these are all actually being done in preview. So nothing has actually changed. Now, if I take preview off, right, and I say 1, punch the capture, it primed, I'm in Latch Prime, it primed all of these parameters. The track is in Latch, right, which it is in Latch. I do have a selection defined, right, and I can certainly adjust that. But if I write to all, it's going to hard print that setting, that treatment of that object on one or multiple tracks to that section. And that's exactly what it looks like right there, right? Okay. Now, let's go one step further. If you actually wanted to transition between setting 1 and setting 2, now you're starting to get slightly clever. You could actually define an exact, time range whereby, let's just see how far. Let me just shrink that a little bit. Okay, so let's actually shrink it a little bit. I'm just using the mark in, mark out buttons on a numeric section here to define a selection. Let's just come in a little bit tighter. Let's just do this, so I don't want it to be too long. Okay, so what am I doing now? I'm basically saying over that time range, I want to get from setting A to setting B. So all I've got to do now is basically, I'm in Latch Prime, I'm on this track, I'm going to recall setting 2. I'm going to basically hit setting 2. I'm going to punch. It's primed all the parameters in setting 2. I want to get there over that time range so I can do a glide to all enabled. Okay, so what did that do? Well, basically, if I interrogate all that stuff, Command Control, if I interrogate all that stuff, you have a linear change. That's what that's doing. I'm going to clear the selection with the down arrow, and I can just hit trim. We can roll back slightly. But we should have a linear change over that time range that goes from those settings. Okay? So, that's a couple different concepts kind of in one big bag, right? It's basically the concept of priming, right? And if I prime some stuff, I'm saying I want to start writing automation from stop, starting here. Here we go, right? That's the concept of priming. Then there's the concept of finding a sound or a treatment or a placement while in preview, right? Non-destructively being able to place something without having any penalty of hurting the automation that's already there. That's what preview is all about. Then if you like that thing that you created, you can dump it into a snapshot. You've got almost 100 snapshots you can dump into. And then if you want to reuse those things, and again, I just showed a very simple one track, one guitar. It could be a whole chorus of sound effects or a whole chorus of guitars or sax, in one Atmos, as Tony said, a treatment of a bunch of elements in space. You can absolutely do that. And then you can preserve that. And then you can do what I just did, which is an auto glide. And it basically transitions, take preview off. It's showing a linear transition between snapshot A and snapshot B. Okay. So that's how you can start to kind of get into some creative ideas. Okay, so I'm sure I've skipped over some very simple things, but I'm going to keep going unless there's any other questions. We talked about the joysticks a little bit.
Let me grill you on something. You do this all the time, and I never do it, and I'm trying to understand it correctly. So
Jonathan Wales,
using the giant ass jog wheel and trim in relation to mark in and mark out also has implications for things like insert follows playback and all sorts of other stuff. So I guess if I'm trying to make a selection in Pro Tools, I'm gonna do what? I'm gonna do mark in first, then go in trim. Is that the basic procedure for that if I'm trying to do it from the wheel?
Yep, that is correct. So now before that, depending on the state of, edit selection versus track selection, if I actually did want to say, I want to select something on the bridge guitar, I would hit select to put the cursor on the bridge guitar. That's what I would do first, personally. And then I would hit mark in. And if you're in music, this is a music session, you could be in grid and it would actually snap to bars and beats. That's useful. If you're in post, it's probably in slip.
For me, it's only making a selection when you go backwards. If I do a mark in and I try and trim forwards, I don't get a selection. I've noticed exactly what you're showing there is the same thing.
Mark in is basically you're setting the in point. So you need to go, you are basically setting the in. Mark out is setting the out. And then trim is moving the selection.
Got it.
And then clear the selection is down arrow. Okay, start over. Mark in. There's your mark in. Mark out. There's your mark out. Press mark out to finish. Press trim to move the selection. Press down arrow to clear the selection.
Got it.
Okay.
Cheers.
So that's good. That's good. That's really useful kind of constant stuff. And the other thing there's lots of little, tips and tricks, but if you have selections, you can use option, I'm basically doing a select all, select none, right? Is what that's doing. If you want to quickly get rid of anything that's selected, that can be useful option. So the modifiers are great. They're really useful.
Earlier you used the term focus in relation to, and then it looked like you hit select. Now I would think focus equals hitting attention. So I got confused right there.
Okay, so let me clarify that because it's totally confusing, right? You've got the diverging worlds of DigiDesign and Avid and Euphonics.
So expand.
Basically, focus only currently exists on S4. So attention is attention is attention. Attention is the triangle, and attentions, right? Yep. The difference with the channel strip module on S4 is you do not have a process module. And so you have to say, how do I know who I'm putting into pan or EQ mode? That's focus, right? Okay, so I focus bridge guitar and I say, I want EQ.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's what focus does. So speaking of EQ, let's do a quick little custom map, which I can think is kind of fun. And basically you can repurpose, actually, no, let's do it on the Dolby Atmos music panner, just to kind of show a different thing real quick here. So let's jump out. And let's go into, let's see, maybe loops or something. And let's attention this track here, okay? So this is a stereo, what is this? Yeah, this is a stereo loop track here, right? But also exists on this track is the Dolby Atmos music panner, which if we go and look at, so again, I'm attention, I'm focused, I'm gonna go back to inserts, and I'm gonna press on the Dolby Atmos music panner insert. Okay, it looks like that. I think I have a map already. We can recreate it really quickly. Basically, it is it's got a sequencer in it. It gives you some cool things where you can actually make pan moves locked to musical values, which is very, very clever. So I'm going to just do this again because you can't get enough of expand faders. Attention, expand, and I'm going to hit clear to blow it away. So besides the normal stuff that you're going to find in Atmos XYZ size, the elevation modes, there's also a step sequencer basically built into it. So what I would do is just X, Y, Z, size, Z, size, elevation mode, step duration. And then on page 2, yes, there are 2 pages. You could put enables for some of the steps. That's what I usually do is put 8 enables. So page 1 is your meat and potatoes. Page 2 actually gets into the step sequencer. Hit expand. So basically the caution here is that only one person can be handshaking metadata with the renderer, right? So if you can actually automate this and you can automate Pro Tools on the same objects at the same time, but you will get some of this going on, right? They will kind of fight each other. So basically figure out on a track by track basis if you want to do more specifically sequenced things with this tool, fine, you can do that. So that's the expand fader map, but that's not what I wanted to show you. I actually want to show you a custom map on the joystick. So the joystick is Pro Tools handshaking to the renderer when you're obviously, in this case, you're in object mode. But what you can also do is you can do a shift function XY. And then I can actually say I want X, Y, right, there's X and Y. And then I can go over here, do the same thing, Shift, X, Y, and I can do Z size. So basically now I have X, Y, Z, and there's Z, there's size, however it makes sense to you. But yeah, you do have the ability to, and then I could flip over and actually do some sequencing stuff from here, right? But you're controlling this very creative tool, and this doesn't have to be this. This could be an EQ, right? It could be anything, but it's a custom XY mapping on the left side and the right side. And to get back to the normal mode, you just press this button, right? So now you're back working, right? In a Pro Tools capacity of driving the metadata. And now you're back, talking through the Dolby plugin, right? Okay, so that's pretty cool. One more thing I should show that's important, that's somewhat confusing and important and useful is, let's go back to pan mode. So function, pan. What I want to show is a little bit of linking stuff. Right. So obviously, if you have the benefit of the joystick, it's super simple, right? You have link mode right there, and you've now just unlinked these things, right? But I can also link and unlink from here. That's part of the app, the knob set, if you will, of the of any pan playlist. Let's just say, okay. So let's re-unlink. That's a word. And get some goofy setting again, right? Very handy, again, to basically relink and then do a clear pan and then basically spread your wings and fly, right? So I'm going to turn the inverse off, but now you're back to kind of a known state, right? So if you want to get back to, you're moving a stereo element around, you can basically just relink, do a clear, it'll zero that, and then you can do a relink them. I think that's pretty useful. And again, the linking is also on the MTM. The divergence we said is here. The linking is here, etc. Okay. How we doing? We're running out of time. There's a million things to show you. Let's see, what's the next most important thing I haven't shown you yet? We did some custom mapping. We talked about objects bus switching. Did some snapshot creation. That's pretty cool. Isolate. Oh, there. Well, okay. We can get in a little more detail on the joystick maybe while we're in the last couple minutes we've got. Let's go back out of this menu button, back to your food groups. Right, I'm in VCAs. Also, always very useful. I can either hit attention to auto spill, or if I want to just specifically get back into guitars, I can menu. Right, I can basically press a specific spill zone to go into. So I'm going to attention the guitar once again. Okay. We're back into this view. I'm going to turn automation off for a second. Go back to read. Shift Y, if you remember, gives me Z in my size. It's handy, right? You do have multiple modes here that are pretty cool. So let's try something. Let's go Shift X, and that'll put me into an elevation mode. What elevation mode am I in? I am in wedge. Let's go into sphere. Okay, we talked about this. So now I'm auto Zing, right? I have isolates, right? So if I turn X off, I can just Y. It will lock out X. That's what that does. And then there's also some different pickup modes, right? So if I actually go and let's just go back into whatever automation mode, doesn't matter. I'm going to go into pickup mode. And so what happens is it's going to play back the existing automation, and I can go and grab the puck, make my move, and then I can basically match out. Okay. So versus, obviously if I'm in latch, it's priming the start. If I'm in, let's hit auto match. If I'm in touch, start with touch, right? It's on grab. It's touch sensitive. I grab, I'm at that position. Okay. That makes sense. If I go into pickup mode, I hit play. it is making the move that I made previously, I can go and I can choose when to grab the puck to punch in. I would match out, and I can either match out on it's going to match out when I let go in touch. In Latch, I could auto match, or I could press the automation button that would match out. Okay. So auto match is always punch out of all automation. The automation switch on the individual writing track is going to punch out of all automation on that track only. That's what that does. Okay. How are we doing? We're almost there. Any last questions? Some panning is deep and vast. There's a lot of control. I wanted to try to show not just assume you have the joystick, or not just assume you're doing everything from the touch screen, that there are absolutely ways to do it, various different ways, from the channel, from the expand, from the fader. And you can find, as Tony said, maybe 2 faders, depending on what particular element you're tweaking, makes more sense for that specific thing. And then, another application or use case is doing the joystick. But you don't have to use the same tool every time that you're doing a pan move.
One other thing to mention, a lot of people, maybe everybody on this call does know this, but a lot of people might not, is that you can also, alongside of an S4 and S6, you can install U-Control software, and you can run the tablet version of Avid Control, and you could use that panner as well. So
it's true. Yeah.
And soft keys.
Yeah, and soft keys. So there's definitely a lot of other options, that you can have, and like Jeff has shown, really cool way to do some of this stuff is to use them together with one another, kind of.
Yeah.
But for things that work best, like, for being able to position things, kind of in the space, joysticks are good. But for certain things, like height, I find that using a fader, just
I agree with
linear motion, that's a lot better way than trying to turn a knob or actually trying to move a joystick around. You have this really nice smooth ability to do that, and that's one, and that can actually even be used in conjunction with the touchscreen panel.
One comment for panning as well. A lot of people I realized don't realize. But like Buddy's comment about the recording in half speed, but don't forget that if you hold shift when you hit play in Pro Tools plays at half speed. And so then for like doing good pan moves, if it's moving quickly and everything else, you can still do it with the joystick, but in half speed.
Yeah, half speed's a great tip.
With the fader maps, if you have EQs that you want to smoothly do, I usually double up on the shift play half speed, and then change my EQ curves to open up the vocals using the fader map. So I have much more granularity, but it's also more organic, at least to my ears.
It's a good one.
Well, that's the really good thing about these surfaces is there's, as we always say, there's probably 10, 15 different ways that you can do any one thing. And you start combining those things together. There's just infinite possibilities on how creative you can be. That, for people that try to mix with a mouse, you start experiencing this kind of control and what you can do creatively. It's no contest at that point.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Eyes when using a mouse, that's what I tell people. Can you close your eyes and mix with a mouse? Forget it. Yeah. Okay, well, we are at the top of the hour, so thanks for hanging out, and we will post this once it's captured. And as always, encourage you to check out the resources. There's tons of videos specific to S4 and S6 if you want to kind of dig in deeper on specific console functions, and a lot of the stuff we talked about in terms of interrogating playlists and preview and Latch Prime and all of that good stuff. This is a good resource to start with, which is this PDF document, and you can kind of step through at your own pace and kind of play with some of the concepts that we discussed. So definitely grab that, and if you don't know how to find it, you can certainly text us, and we will point you in that direction. So
And like Jeff said earlier, that particular document, it's very touch centric because of how you can navigate around. So having that on like an iPad or an Android app, because it's just a PDF, beside the console, it's just a really quick way to get in there, find something really quick without having to get out of what you're doing in Pro Tools on your main computer. So just FYI with that, it's not something that's just on a computer. It can basically be used on any type of device. I mean, most phones are going to be a little bit small for it, but your tablets are like the perfect size to be able to have that kind of right next to you, like Jeff said, and great reference.
Absolutely. So thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.